Holy shike, let's talk about pigs. Here's your host of the Pork Podcast, Jennifer Shike.
There's just something about the story behind the story. And as a storyteller, I'm always searching for ways to give readers just a little bit more. And that's what the Pork Podcast is all about, bringing you stories of the people and the progress of the pork industry. I'm Jennifer Shike. Let's go find just a little bit more. So welcome, Jesse. It's great to have you on today.
Good morning.
I'll never forget meeting you. Let's just say it was a few years ago when I went to work for the National Swine Registry. And I guess I could say that I've had the honor of watching you grow up from a teenager with lots of big ideas about the show pig industry into who many would call a generational leader for the U.S. pork industry. So, I guess I would start off by saying we've had a lot of things happen in both of our lives since those early days. But I do think one thing has remained consistent. We both share a passion for people and helping them find opportunity in the pork industry. And despite the different ways our futures have unfolded, I don't think that's changed. And so as I thought about where to start the Pork Podcast, it seemed fitting to start it off with someone who shares that vision and dream for helping young people find their place in this industry. But I guess the one thing I want to start off with is, let's just get real. That wasn't exactly the direction that you received when you graduated from college, was it?
No, when I graduated from college in 2003, I don't think there was anyone in my close circle that encouraged me to stay in the swine industry. In fact, most of the encouragement was to exit as quickly as I could and get on with my life in another career, another avenue, another industry, period. To be honest, I just didn't have anyone supporting me to stay in the pig business. And so that's what I did. I dispersed the sows that I had in 2003 that was formerly known as Show Me Genetics, sold all of those sows in 2003. And I left the industry for 3 years, 3+ years, actually. And 2006 is when I came back. So I think times were drastically different, especially in the show pig industry at that time. The 90s, we saw a lot of growth, but nothing compared to what we've seen in the 21st century here over the last 20 years, especially.
Yeah. So what brought you back?
The simple answer is I missed pigs. The production side of it, the actual pig farming, if you will, is still the part that I'm really in love with on a daily basis. I still, in fact, we bred sows today, and that's something that I enjoy. I still ear notch the pigs, and raising pigs is still something that I'm passionate about. But beyond that, I think it was really that sense of purpose about the next generation. I saw the growth and the excitement around showing pigs. The excitement level today, there's no shortage of enthusiasm for people who want to show pigs, exhibit pigs, raise pigs, be involved in the vibrant industry that we call the show pig business. And I saw an opportunity there to get back involved. And I can't say that I would have forecasted how things have gone, but I certainly saw an opportunity. And so you could say that the pigs and the people brought me back.
Mm-hmm. So I know some of the listeners may know this about us, but we actually had a pretty unique opportunity to share a front seat to the development of the National Junior Swine Association back in 2000. And I would say that, we were part of a real big turning point in our industry. I remember being hired to go to the National Swine Registry fresh out of college, and there just being a lot of challenges for purebred swine breeders to figure out how they were going to keep selling enough pigs to stay profitable to be in the business. There was no shortage of passion in the industry, and that's what I fell in love with. But there was definitely a need to stimulate demand. And so as I think back to that process, which I know that we could spend the whole podcast talking about, which we shouldn't, but I guess in light of that, as you look back, what do you think are some of the leadership experiences that you had as you helped serve as the first president of the National Junior Swine Association Board of Directors? What are some of those experiences that you gained through serving on that board that you believe are helpful to you today?
In short, I would say dream big. Anything's possible. The steering committee actually met in 1998 in West Lafayette. That was one of the very first attempts at a national junior show. I remember that meeting like it was yesterday. We were in the boardroom at the National Swine Registry, and and really just whiteboarding and spitballing and throwing out hopes and dreams, more or less. And it was a passionate group of people the same age that really were in love with showing pigs. We wanted to see more opportunities for ourselves, selfishly, and then the next generation to follow. And I think the biggest takeaway that day was, I don't think any of us even dreamed big enough that day. And we had some pretty big dreams. We had some very in-depth conversations about what it could be and what it might be. And I think suffice to say that today it's way beyond anything we ever imagined. And the National Junior Swine Association today is it's a big driver for our industry. It's certainly expanded show pig notoriety around the country, show pig enthusiasm from coast to coast in different regions. And if you look at the way the NJSA was structured, from a show standpoint and the exposure that it gave showing pigs around the country, and then you add in all of the leadership aspects to the association and what it provides young people. And I think today it certainly is a big driver for our industry.
Well, I remember that being such an interesting time period, because when Daryl Anderson called me up to ask me to come be this really long job of like a website manager, which I knew nothing about managing a website, and the director or coordinator for the junior program, I just thought, what am I getting myself into? And really, I was like, if I could just last 2 years, that won't look bad on my resume, and I'll be able to move on into a job that I really want to do. Because honestly, like, I wasn't sure that was a job I wanted to do. I believed in it, but I think there were a lot of unknowns. And I was a 21 when they hired me, but quickly turned 22-year-old, trying to lead this effort of a lot of big dreams from kids with pretty big personalities and ideas. And I mean, it was not always easy. And as I look back, I think, gosh, I'm so grateful for some of those key people that were maybe a few years ahead of me down the road, that really had a belief in like what we could accomplish and just let us go with our big ideas and dreams. Because quite frankly, some of them didn't seem very possible. And every idea that we had, I had to find a way to raise money for it too. And so I as I look back, I just think like that was such a great time for me. It was very hard for me to leave that job. But I can say, as a mom who has kids who participate in that organization now, like, there's nothing better than to see that. And I know your kids participate too. So what is it like for you to be able to have your kids be involved in this organization today?
I think you've touched on something that's been a big growth driver for our industry, generally speaking. I mean, we've got a generational aspect right now in the show pig business where we have parents like you and I. We want that experience for our kids. It was very profound for us. It was impactful for me. And I want that same experience for my kids. And as I think about the challenges that comes along for parents today, I think a lot of it is solved when we get kids involved in the junior livestock program. And so, for me, it's a surreal thing to go to a NJSA event and look around at the size and scope and the opportunities that my kids have today compared to what I had 20 years ago. It's drastically different in a very positive way. And, I think I continue to have opportunities to deal with parents who had a great experience showing livestock 20, 30 years ago. And that's part of our opportunity today in this show pig business, is that we're dealing with parents who they had a great experience showing. They want that same thing for their kid. They've been away from production agriculture for an extended period of time, so they don't have the know-how, they don't have the knowledge. But once they get involved with the project, I shared a story at US Ship a few weeks ago, and I talked about there's a common theme amongst show pig producers today, and it's how most of them got their start. And if you polled the crowd, a lot of them got their start because as a family or as a person, they fell in love with their show gilt. And they bought a female. She was successful. A judge along the line told them that, she had potential to be a generator. So they kept her. And, the beautiful thing about our industry today is there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can do it. And so you take your show gilt and you call one of the semen providers in our country and order semen. If the UPS truck does their job, it shows up, you breed your gilt, you farrow your sow, and all of a sudden you're one of the 60 plus thousand pork producers we have in this country. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because without that experience, without that opportunity, how else are we going to get, that stockmanship and that opportunity for folks to learn and understand how to raise a pig, how to farrow a litter, how to take care of pigs. All of those things come through this program. And I think that's a pretty beautiful, powerful thing that we have going for us.
So less than a year ago, I think it was, you called me up and you had some questions for me and you kind of grilled me a little bit. And I was a little bit wondering what you were asking me all those questions for. But you were preparing to run for the National Pork Board's Board of Directors. And I applaud you and think it's pretty awesome that you made all those calls and that you really sought out all those different ideas. So, what were some of your key takeaways from the conversations that you had with a wide variety of people across our industry? And I guess, how did those conversations motivate you to say yes to taking on that director role?
It's a pretty loaded question. I'll kind of start with the why. And the why for me, um, probably over the last 3 years, and it really started with the Pork Leadership Institute and that program that's a joint effort between MPPC and the Pork Checkoff to sort of cultivate leaders for the industry. It gave me an opportunity to see several different facets of our industry, both on the MPPC side, the policy side, and the checkoff side, whether it's research, promotion, or education, and really got a glimpse of all sides of that. And so that opportunity to see that firsthand and to gain a better understanding about the opportunity to get involved was really the start. And then I was asked to go to Europe. Was a really sort of a random ask, but I was asked to go to Europe to learn about ASF with a contingency of folks from both organizations, veterinarians, producers, and more specifically, they wanted me to go uh, to get a firsthand account of ASF, the detrimental effect of African swine fever to the swine industry in Europe, and have that perspective to share with my fellow show pig colleagues. And it really was a golden opportunity to go learn not just about ASF, but to meet an incredible group of people and spend, I think it was 8 or 9 days overseas with folks that are leaders in the swine industry. And that really made it very clear to me that the show pig industry as we know it today lacked representation. And it was very obvious that if we wanted to be, and I say we collectively, if we as show pig breeders, exhibitors, producers, whatever title you want to give us, if we wanted to be at the table for discussion about the US pork industry, if we wanted to be part of that conversation as a whole, somebody had to get involved and step up and lean into that conversation. And I felt pretty convicted to do it. I felt like it was an opportunity to give back in a way, and to get involved and to use, I guess, some of my time for that opportunity. So, I 3 years ago, I would have never guessed that the opportunity to run for the National Pork Board of Directors would be an opportunity for me. But it was, the timing was right. And to your point, I reached out to several friends and colleagues to get a better understanding. Admittedly, I haven't been involved in the national pork scene, if you will. If you haven't been climbing a state pork leadership tree, or if you haven't been involved in national pork issues, committees, policy discussions, it can be a difficult path to serve on a national level. So, my effort was really to reach out and just get a better understanding of expectations in the role, to understand the election process, the caucus process, the interview process, and everything that went along with it. And more than anything, just make sure that sort of my compass was pointed the right direction, that I was doing the right thing, and that this was something that was worthwhile. And I can tell you, to date, it's been so much more than I even imagined. It's been incredible. The opportunity to have conversations with like-minded people that are more than anything just totally concerned about the U.S. pork industry, and that's been really fun.
Well, I decided to take a little bit of your advice and your process, and I reached out to some people that I know had the chance to listen to you when you spoke at the U.S. Swine Health Improvement Plan, or U.S. SHIPS, meeting that they had, and you serve as the exhibition swine producer representative. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Actually, the U.S. ship, the way that it was started, it initially did not have exhibition focus.
Mhm.
And they quickly figured out that they needed to at least acknowledge our existence. And they added a member to the General Conference Committee, which is essentially the board, to represent the exhibition swine community, if you will. And then even beyond that, last year at the GCC, or the House of Delegates, the delegates voted unanimously to establish a working group, and a working group to discuss all the issues surrounding the exhibition of swine.
Oh, that's good news. Well, so I really appreciate that you serve in that role. I think that's really important, and I'm very excited about what U.S. Ship is doing. But what I want to get into are a few things that Jill Ressler, CEO of Minnesota Pork, and Kylie Denise, executive director of the Oklahoma Pork Council, had to say about what you had to say. So one of the things that Jill said that stood out to me was she describes you as a catalyst for shifting the paradigm of how the broader pork industry views the show pig community. That's a pretty big statement. Do you agree with it? And why or why not?
Those are big words. I certainly appreciate my friend Jill, and she's been a great, encouraging supporter for me in this entire endeavor. Um, those are kind words, and I would like to think that I'm trying to do that more than anything. It's an ongoing process, and I think you brought up an interesting point earlier about if we look back 20 plus years ago and we talk about the way the purebred swine industry was 20 plus years ago. I think most of us would be very surprised to realize that the commercial industry still views the show pig industry that way. There's nearly a 2 decade plus gap um, in their idea of what the show pig industry is. So, part of what I've done more than anything over the last couple of years is just have conversations, because it's really just a lack of awareness about who we are, what we do, why we're passionate about it, why it's important, what it means. And, the opportunity to speak at US Ship was a pretty unique opportunity, because that room, there's producers there, there are state pork executive folks there. But I would argue that the most important group in the room are the state animal health officials. And the state animal health officials, for those of us that have been to a pig show in the last 12 months or the last 10 years, uh, they have the utmost authority about the sheer existence of a livestock show. And they are entrusted with making sure that our animals are healthy when they show up, making sure that our animals are healthy when they leave. And it's their duty to make sure that they understand who came and who went. And so, having a conversation with state animal health officials about why showing pigs matters was something that I took very serious, and it was a really enjoyable couple days there in Minnesota.
Well, I was so impressed. I had the chance to sit in on a webinar. Well, we did. Feels like it's been 300 years ago, but it was just last summer with Dr. Brett Marsh, and it was fun to just see him not only be supportive of what we're all doing, but also convey to the young people of why their role is so important, and to their parents and the breeders and families there. But I felt like he also walked away with a lot of excitement and encouragement about what the young kids had to offer too. And I think it was neat to see some of those things click for him. He's been a supporter for a long time, but I actually had the chance to see him engage with some kids, and I thought that was pretty cool. So super
He has
grateful for
been a
that.
true champion for the exhibition community. I can tell you firsthand that in a traceability committee meeting, this would have been in 23 for MPPC, as we were approaching the mandate for traceability that was ultimately submitted to USDA, and we're in a waiting period now to get that final rule back. But in that process, I was given an hour in one of those committee meetings to talk about what we do as a show pig industry from a traceability standpoint. And I talked about what we do in Missouri. I talked about what the folks do in Texas. I talked about what folks do in Ohio. I talked about what folks do in Oklahoma. And Dr. Marsh was kind enough to jump on that conversation and brag about what the families and kids do in Indiana. And he was a true champion for the folks that show livestock in his state. He had very positive things to say about our community, about our exhibitors, our families, our kids that are showing livestock. And he talked about it in a way that was very understandable for that crowd of people. He walked them through the premise ID process, the 840 tag process, all of the standards that really have been set by show pig folks in the state of Indiana. And he was a very proud state vet that day, and he's been a great champion for what we do in our industry right now.
Well, I think fostering that connection between those young leaders in our organizations with the industry is so important. I guess one of the things I have to share this story with you is I went to my first day on the job for Farm Journal's Pork. It really switching roles to kind of, the job I thought I'd always had, but I hadn't had so far, of being a livestock editor and serving the commercial pork industry. So I go to the Layman Swine Conference and talk about just jumping into the deep end. But I was so overwhelmed as I sat out in the crowd by how many NJSA or Team Purebred former leaders were the speakers. They were the experts that day. And I know that I had tears in my eyes, and I can kind of get that way about it because it means so much to me. But I listened to Emily Byers Taylor, Hyatt Frobos, and Josh Floor all speak on 3 different topics. And I just couldn't help but think to myself, we would have lost them if it wasn't for the fact that they showed pigs, that they loved showing pigs, and that they loved it so much they didn't want to leave it. So they found a way to stay involved. One as a veterinarian, one as a nutritionist, another as a nutritionist and vet tech specialist. I mean, these guys have gone on to make huge impact on the industry. And I just couldn't help but be very humbled by the fact, like, it was pretty cool to be able to see that come to fruition. And I heard that you made a point about something similar to this at the US SHIP meeting. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
I did, and I got to give props to my buddy Clay's Willing because he helped me with this idea. But I'm convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that the junior livestock program, and we don't have to just talk about pigs here, but the junior livestock program is the #1 gateway to a career in agriculture. And more than anything, we have to hold on to that, because without that gateway, without that opportunity to show livestock and to participate in the junior livestock program, we're going to lose a major pipeline for our industry. And so at US SHIP, as we closed that day, I asked the room to stand up. We had sat through a banquet dinner, a speaker, and everybody was a little bit restless. I asked them to stand up, and I talked for just a quick second about what I believe relative to the junior livestock program. And I asked anyone that had not shown a steer, a heifer, a pig, a gilt, a goat, sheep. I said, even if you've shown a chicken, you need to stand up, or you need to stay standing. If you have not shown any livestock, please sit down. And I think you would be amazed. I don't know how many people were there, but I would guess 200 to 300 plus probably. I think you'd be surprised at how few people sat down. And I asked them to look around and to make sure that they had a clear understanding of how many of their colleagues had showed livestock. And then I asked everyone that was older than 40 to sit down. And the number got a lot smaller. And I looked at all of those folks, and I encouraged them, because they are the leaders. They are the ones that will be leading agriculture going forward. And it's their responsibility to recruit, to prepare, to cultivate the next generation that'll come behind them. And, I think all of that's possible as long as we acknowledge where that talent's coming from, and we acknowledge how it's getting there, and we work together to make sure it continues. And, to your point, without that show pig project, those 3 individuals that you mentioned, it's highly doubtful that they would be in the roles that they are in today. And, I can say the same for myself. I know that's the same for you. And we could go on and on and on about the number of folks that we know in agriculture today that got their start through the junior livestock program. So more than anything, I think it was just an opportunity to remind the crowd that showing livestock is not new. This is not a new phenomenon. Obviously there are ways that we do it different today, but everything in society is progressed. So, this isn't something new. This is something that's been around for a long time, and it's been profoundly impactful for people in our industry for a very long time.
Love that. And I don't want to go negative here, but I want to be real. We can celebrate that we have all these great stories and opportunities and moments like this. And I can think of so many of them. And I love doing everything I can to share those. But I will also just be honest with you that at that same layman swine conference, I listened to a veterinarian just basically cuss show pigs up and down. And I think it was hard for me because, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I fit in? I can't deny that I love the show pig industry and that I believe in fostering it for young people and for the breeders who work so hard to make livestock better and to provide opportunities like that for kids like my kids. So I could not deny that that was where I came from, but I also heard the challenges. And so I think it's good to be in this place though right now where I'm aware and understand to an even deeper level what the stakes are, and it gives me a better perspective as I go out as a parent, as a supporter of our industry. But I guess my point is there's a lot of big differences out there. And I think there's been improvements, but the divide is there still. So how do you plan to foster greater alignment between the show pig industry and the commercial industry? What are some of the things that you've been trying to do or that you think are important messages for people to hear who may find themselves on one side or the other? It doesn't really matter which side.
Well, it all starts with conversation. And more than anything, I think that I've tried to be present for conversation and to be open for the discussion about the differences between our commercial counterparts and those of us that are raising or showing pigs. And there are obvious differences. And I can tell you that all of us have challenges. Commercial pigs aren't immune to health issues. Show pigs are not immune to health issues. Biosecurity is still important for anyone with a pig. And so, there's plenty of room for conversation about the differences, but I think most of it just starts with having some respect and understanding about those differences, and to be appreciative of the positives. So, I haven't been met with a lot of resistance when given the chance to have a conversation, but I think for far too long, there's been this negative impression about show pigs and who we are and what we do, and why we even exist. I think there's been such a negative connotation associated with us that it's going to take time to change some opinions, and it's going to take time and patience to improve that image, if you will. But I don't. I think it also starts with us that show and raise pigs. I think we need to be proud of who we are and what we do. I think we need to stand up and be proud of the fact that we are pig producers. We are affecting the next generation. We are the first folks that affect the next generation of leaders, the next generation of producers, and more than anything, the next generation of agriculture advocates. And we have an opportunity to influence the public, perhaps even more than our commercial counterparts. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, whether it's our exhibitions or whether it's the platform that we have on social media today. We have an opportunity to be more influential than anyone else in the industry right now. And that alone deserves a lot more conversation.
Mhm. I don't know if you ever saw my article that I wrote about no, he's not a buffalo, but we've had the privilege of being in the Hall of Champions with the champion market hog the past 2 years at Illinois State Fair, and incredible opportunity. Not just because, oh yeah, it's great to win a show, that's all fine, but I've just been shocked by the opportunity that's presented us to just have real conversations with real people, consumers, maybe not even consumers, people who don't really believe in what we do. It's given us a chance, my children and myself and my husband, to just really talk to people and to understand where they're coming from and to be a little bit of a voice for the industry. And I think that's something that I try to encourage my kids to take that privilege and opportunity to do that seriously, because they may be the only window that somebody has into agriculture. But you did bring that up too at the meeting. Kylie said you talked at US Ship about a moment you shared with a mom and two little girls at the Missouri State Fair. And I know I'm running out of time here, but I'd love to have you share that story with everybody because I think it's so important.
Yeah, it was a random morning for breakfast at Trucks there at Missouri State Fairgrounds. It's the cafe on the corner by the swine barn. It's where everybody gets breakfast. And it was mid-morning. We had already finished up everything that needed to be done. And I was down there just kind of on a whim to grab something to eat quick. And the line was long. And the short version of a longer story is we were both sitting there waiting for our food. And this mom and her two girls had waited for a long time. And those girls were, they were kind of over being patient. And their food finally came. And one of the girls had eggs and bacon and the other girl had pancakes and sausage. And they had been to the pig barn and they had been talking amongst themselves about being in the swine barn. And when they got their food and they were really enjoying it, their mom said something pretty profound that I felt like was very important to share to that audience that day. She told the girls, she said, "Aren't you glad that a farmer did all the work so that you could enjoy this breakfast?" And it was something so simple, yet it was pretty profound, because I think we often lose sight of that disconnect between the average consumer today and agriculture. And in that moment, had that mom not went to the swine barn and had those girls not seen pigs, they would have not made the connection between those pigs in that barn and the sausage and bacon and the pork that they had for breakfast that morning. And that's something that at that age is very impactful. And I wanted to share that story with the audience at US Ship because too often we think about exhibition, we think about pig shows, and we only talk about the kids and the parents and the pigs and the families, and we lose sight of the public. And to your point, the public and their opportunity to see agriculture firsthand at an exhibition is pretty important.
So well said. And I appreciate that we have so many great leaders and so many great families out there that are working to share that story. And I appreciate all that you are doing to help connect everybody together and to learn from different stakeholders. I admire how you continually seek out conversation and ideas, whether it's at the grocery store or whether it's at the county fair or whether it's at a swine health conference. You're always out there making those moves, and I think that's really important and a great example to others. And so I just want to say thank you again for joining me and helping me survive my first pork podcast. I hope it hasn't been too painful on you.
It was great. It was great.
Well, and thank you guys for joining us today. You can dive into more of the Pork Podcast on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and listen to it anywhere podcasts are found. I'm Jennifer Scheich, finding the story behind the story.